is 2 o'clock Central Time, so that means it must be 3 o'clock Eastern Time. Good afternoon and welcome to everyone. I'm Ellen Thompson and I'm here today on behalf of the National Association of Agricultural Educators to kick off and introduce the third in a series of 6 agricultural education for all learning sessions that NAAE and National FFA are offering as part of our continued commitment to ensuring that all feel safe, welcome, and celebrated as their authentic selves in our organizations. And so this again is the third in a series. We've had great turnout so far, about 70 to 75 in the previous 2. Those of you that were able to join the last 2, you should have received earlier today your professional development certificates. And so just as a reminder, you will be receiving professional development credit for this, assuming that you are on the call for the majority of the time. As I said, this is the third in a series of 6. We'll likely offer another series this coming fall. And for those of you that may be interested, tomorrow afternoon at 1:30 Eastern Time, Dr. Roger Cleveland, who is the associate that we have been working with and has been hired to help us on our inclusion, diversity, and equity efforts, will be offering a session specifically for leaders in agricultural education, agriculture teachers, teacher educators, state staff, individuals who may be interested in how you can develop your own state inclusion, diversity, and equity plan. So that'll be a really great session. If you have not received the information about that and you would like to join that session, please let me know. Information went out via the listserv and has been provided through a various number of communications assets. The session today will last approximately 1 hour-ish. And then for the last few, we have been staying on or asking our presenters to be able to stay on for an additional half an hour for kind of informal questions and conversation. So you are more than welcome to stay on for that. I know that has been very valuable to both the presenters and to those that have been able to do that. So you're looking at about an hour of led conversation and then about 30 minutes or so of informal, just kind of whatever questions you may have. This is being recorded and archived on the NAAA website where you registered for this information. So the last 2 sessions are now up and recorded, as well as the PowerPoints that went along with them. Questions are encouraged. We do encourage you to use the chat just to keep it more formal. I'll be monitoring that, as well as my colleague Sarah Warren at NAAE, and so we'll try to make sure that we get those shared with the presenters so that they can answer them either during this or during that informal after party, I guess you could call it. Just as a reminder, we hope that you're all here because you want to learn and grow and share and just be part of this really important and valuable conversation. This is a safe place for you to ask questions, explore ideas, and become more inclusive and accepting and empathetic, and really just an opportunity to learn. We call them learning sessions because even I believe the presenters are learning through this process as well. None of us are experts in this, but if we work together and share ideas and come to this with an open mind and an open heart, we can all be better humans. And I think that's really the goal of these sessions. So with that, I'd like to introduce today's topic, which is cultural humility. What's that all about? This session is presented by our good friend, Dr. Erica Gray, who did a session 2 weeks ago. So this one is about how your organization or school can be inclusive and understanding of a variety of cultures, races, abilities, and differences. Sometimes when we talk about diversity, we often only think about race. And I know that that's come up a lot in the conversations I've had with ag ed folks. We want to be always thinking about diversity can mean all of the things that make us unique, all of those identities that we all hold dear to ourselves that bring value to us and to society. And so Dr. Gray is going to be sharing that with us, and you should be able to leave with a greater understanding of cultural competence, as well as your own cultural perceptions. Dr. Erica Gray, as I said, joined us a couple of weeks ago. She's currently the Director of Persistence and Scholarship at Kentucky State University. She is a counselor for the TRIO Talent Search Program in Kentucky, as well as co-owns Twisted Sister Fitness, is the advisor of the National Society of Black Engineers at the University of Louisville, and is a board member of the alumni association at the University of Illinois. She's passionate higher education professional. She knows and understands what it's like to be in the classroom as an educator. And so Dr. Erica Gray, I'd like to turn it over to you and introduce you to about 80 or so of our wonderful and esteemed agricultural education colleagues. And those of you that have questions about the other session tomorrow, I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. But otherwise, Dr. Gray, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll be here monitoring the chat and jumping in as needed and wrapping up at the end.
Everyone, I'm partly laughing because she said 80 people and it gave me chills because people are staring at you even though you can't really see them stare at you, but they're staring at you. I also want to give you like a quick little note about me. I taught middle school, so I have some interactive things in here. I like questions, so please ask them when you have them, and I hope you enjoy and learn something. I'm sharing my screen. 1 second, please. Okay, so cultural humility. The best way to summarize, so you don't have to say cultural humility, is to think of it as being humble in the space of, I may be aware of my culture and maybe a few others, but I'm humble enough to know that I could learn a whole lot more about someone else's culture. So what is cultural humility exactly? It's a humble and respectful attitude towards individuals of other cultures that pushes one to challenge their own cultural biases, realize they cannot possibly know everything about other cultures, and approach learning about other cultures as a lifelong goal and process. No matter how long we live, how many conferences we go to, how many different schools we teach at with different socioeconomic backgrounds, we don't know everything about everyone's culture. We may have some experiences that other people have shared with us, which is great, but we don't know everything. And one way to kind of check yourself about your cultural awareness and biases is to understand that you don't know everything and you stand to learn a lot more. In the classroom, and let me stop right there for a second. I'm presenting this as if you would use these things in the classroom, but you can also use them as a staff collectively through professional development as well. Cultural humility is also the process of self-evaluation that focuses on how our culture influences our perceptions of other communities and their impacts. So that's saying, while I know my culture and I understand it, I don't think that I'm superior to someone else because of their culture and the things that their culture is known for, does, believes in, has traditions about. It's understanding that while we're different, we can still be very much alike. So here's the fun part. If I can get it to work, here we go. So at the top of the screen, you can either use your computer or, 1 second. Okay, here we go. So you can either use your computer or you can text your answer in. The link and the short code are at the top. And once you start to answer, all the answers will show on the screen. So the first question Have you ever acquired a belief? Have you ever acquired a belief or behavior from your culture without looking at where and why those very beliefs originated? So we have a yes. Yes, all the time, unfortunately. Yes. 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 And the yeses are not shocking. In fact, most of us do not question what our family or our traditions have led us to believe. We just feel like, oh, this is something that my family has always done. This is something we believe in, and we go with it. I think in the era of doing the DNA test to check your ethnicity, where you come from, who you're connected to, people have started to question some of those things, but initially we don't question the things that we're told to believe about our cultures or ethnicities. So next question. Do you feel that you are aware of personal biases and assumptions about people with different values than your own? And I've made a note to myself to interject right here that, does somebody have a question? No. To interject right here that acknowledging that you have a personal bias or having questions about what you may feel biased about doesn't mean that someone is racist or is only highlighting racial differences. And that's where some of the confusion and the gray area is. Having question and wanting to know more does not mean that you're thinking less than of someone. It just simply means you're interested in knowing more about someone and their experiences. Technology is not my thing, I'm sorry. Okay. Cultural humility includes 3 factors. Factor 1 is a lifelong commitment to self-evaluation and self-critique. So I kind of hit this in the beginning. Being humble with yourself and just knowing and having self-awareness about you allows you to be more flexible and bold with learning about others. When you can say to yourself, I know myself, but I know that I'm not superior to anyone, and I'm willing to be open and learn from other people about their experiences and their background and their traditions, it's factor 1 of cultural humility. Factor 2 is the desire to fix power imbalances where none ought to exist. This is simply saying that you don't believe that your culture or your tradition outweighs someone else's. You don't think that from a historical standpoint, what your culture is used to and has traditions of is better than another. But do you think that? Does somebody have a question? Nope. Okay. Factor 3. Aspiring to develop partnerships with people and groups who advocate for others. This one, in the context of the classroom, I use a lot with college students. While you do learn a lot in college, in the classroom, you do learn a lot if you have internships and you're allowed to apply what you learn in the classroom at work. The sole primary benefit of going to college is meeting people that are nothing like you. Being able to step outside of the box that you grew up in, the environment you grew up in, the typical space or community that you grew up in, and now you're in a shared area with people who know nothing about where you came from and you know nothing about them. You have the opportunity to learn a whole lot more, and that a lot more also factors into being global citizens, being able to work on teams after graduation when you get your job, being able to communicate with people from areas where you met someone in college and they taught you a few things about how their culture does business. Well, now you're allowed to talk business within those spaces because you learned from other people. It's not always what you learn in a textbook. It's sometimes what you learn from other people. What is cultural competence? Cultural competence is the ability to interact effectively with people who have cultural experiences, beliefs, practices, values, traditions, and ways of communicating that are different from our own. So cultural competence is not only acknowledging that cultures are different and experiences are different, it's also acknowledging that there's value in learning those differences and aligning them with your own. It's also the ongoing process where our level changes in response to new situations and experiences and relationships. It's often tackled by learning about the patterns or behaviors, beliefs, language, values, and customs of particular groups. And it's a combination of three elements: awareness, knowledge, and skills, which I'll break down on a later slide. Having awareness of cultural competency is being comfortable with the differences that exist between ourselves and people we encounter, and not presuming our values and expectations are superior. Cultural competence for students. I have the belief, which could be a bias, that students have the ability to see things in a different lens than us, not just because we're adults and they're children, but they don't have the many life experience barriers that we do when it comes to culture. So having to combat our cultural bias means that we have to say that we have them. For students, they are more able to just sit down, have conversation, be open, be free without having internal question. We, based on our life experiences, have a tendency of sitting down with others and having all kinds of questions inside of us about the person across from us that can be a barrier for accepting, hearing, and understanding their experiences. The knowledge of cultural competency is understanding the cultural, political, and social factors that influence how people from another culture interact and communicate. In my class it's a college level course, we talk heavily about culture and traditions because you have students in your classroom who celebrate things that other students don't, who celebrate holidays that we aren't familiar with, who have traditions and are expected to act, perform, behave in certain ways that we might not be used to. Those are learning opportunities for us to get to know people, to get to know their cultures, to understand their experience. And while having conversation helps you gain experience, doing a little research on your own is okay as well. And it's even more okay to ask questions about the things you research of the person whose tradition or culture that you're researching. The skills of cultural competency. Learning about multiple aspects of a culture through research, tutoring, participation, and collaboration. The best example I can think of this is when schools have like cultural fairs, and they let each cultural tradition have a table or booth, and people go around and learn about them from that aspect. It also gives people who may not understand our culture an opportunity to kinesthetically see our culture, to see the things that come from our culture that we have experience with, and have conversation and dialogue surrounding those. The skills of cultural competency are also communicating accurately and appropriately through speech, gestures, and writing. This is where research and conversation comes in, so that you're not sensitive to someone's culture, or you don't misspeak or misread about something from someone's culture. The differences in cultural humility and cultural competency. Cultural humility, you're the expert. It's meant to equip you with the right questions, represents a shift in focus from confidence in one's own knowledge to the difference to another's knowledge. So it's saying, I'm aware of what I know, and I'm aware that I don't know everything. Tell me these things about your experiences and about your culture. Cultural competency, I'm the expert. The goal of competency is to equip you with the right answers, as if the culture you are experiencing is a language you have learned to interpret. So it's saying, I can acknowledge what I don't know, but here are the things that I do know, and I can share the things that I do know about this culture or tradition from my aspect, because I've researched it, I've experienced it, or I know someone who's experienced it, I've asked questions, I found out for myself, and I can accept those differences and talk about them. Cultural humility is a lifelong process. It's meant to equip you with the right questions, represents a shift in focus from confidence in one's own knowledge to difference to another's knowledge. So it's a lifelong process of constant learning. I'm always wanting to learn more and more about cultures and differences, so that I understand people more as I come in contact with them. Cultural competency as an end product. It's a certification that you can earn, qualifying you to engage in an approved way, like a license to practice or conversation. So if you wanted to learn more to the level of teaching cultural competency, you would seek those certifications to help you understand differences from a general aspect, but also adding levels of differences by researching different cultures. Cultural humility implies a subjective set of best practices, while cultural competency implies an objective of set best practices as well. However, one is for self, the other is so that you can educate others. A more colorful breakdown of the two. Competency is knowledge and training, while humility is introspective and co-learning. Competency is the idea that one can become competent in other cultures, and humility is the idea of learning with and from clients. Competency is based on academic knowledge rather than a lived experience, while humility has no end goal or end result. Competency promotes skill building and working toward an end goal. Humility encourages lifelong learning with an appreciation of the journey. Competency supports the myth that culture does not change, and humility attempts to diminish power dynamics between advocate and survivor. So one is theory cognitive based, the other is learning through experience. Excuse me. So at the surface, understanding is the ability to understand something or to have comprehension of something. As an adjective, we understand something about someone. We understand their feelings, we understand their beliefs, we understand their expectations. I broke down understanding by differences. We have differences in culture, differences in race, differences in abilities, and then understanding differences in general. Again, middle school teacher, I like words to float in. So it's culture, becoming self-aware, doing your own research, asking questions, being more accepting, don't stereotype, and look at differences as uniqueness. Race, by definition, is distinct populations within a larger species. Racial characteristics are physical and can change from skin, eye, hair color, facial structures. Human race is defined as a group of people with certain common inherited features that distinguish them from other groups of people. A little fun fact, and I literally wrote fun fact when I was doing research. I was looking up how many different races there are that make up the human race. And for about 45 minutes, I kept coming up with 4 and 7. So I just decided to share the majority of them and then allow all of us the opportunity to research them on our own. So the 7 major races: Caucasian, African American, Chinese, Asian, Mexican, Native American, and Alaskan. From race comes ethnicity, and from ethnicity is where culture and tradition differences lie. I also wrote this so that I can interject right here, that I had to be explicit in saying that understanding, knowing, learning, or even misunderstanding racial differences does not equate to racism. Acknowledging racial differences is like addressing the elephant in the room. Racism is treating the elephant differently because he's an elephant. So wanting to know more, using language to signify that you want to know more, will not make you look like you're thinking that someone is inferior at all. It's our action, or could be action, that would make someone feel that way, not the inquiry. Combating racial differences, you can do this by validating the experiences of others, as they will not be like yours. Be thoughtful of other people's experiences and differences. Be understanding of how different lives are across races. And be aware and considerate of your own bias. With difference in abilities, it got really theoretical and cognitive when I was researching this part, because abilities can form in 2 different ways. You can have an innate ability to do something really good, and you can be really good at learning things, which means you have a higher ability to achieve something. Abilities in general are natural skills that support our acquisition of knowledge. And we have 4 basic abilities. Everyone has differing levels of abilities. Some people are really good at one, others are good at something else. Combating the difference in abilities is by highlighting the opposite. As adults, we highlight the things, and this is for in the classroom and could cross-reference to a workspace. Highlight the things that are done well to keep confidence high. Another way is to highlight similarities and not to ignore the differences. And help combat combat privilege so no one thinks that the other person feels superior because they have higher abilities than someone else. How abilities are behaviors. So I acknowledge that there's 4 different levels of abilities. There's planning, which means your way of increasing abilities is to plan your learning. Paying attention to details is a level of an ability, because paying attention to details helps acquire knowledge for something. Simultaneous processing. So people who learn while doing, people who are kinesthetic, people who have to be actively engaged in lecture or in a classroom are simultaneously processing their ability along with their acquisition of knowledge. And successive processing. So in general, differences are a point or way in which people or things are not the same. How do we explore differences? We seek out experiences, and that can be with food, people, things that seem foreign to you. If you live in a pretty diverse town, going to different areas of the town, exploring their food options, exploring their shopping areas, just being around their culture. Expand your media diet. So if you follow people or follow organizations or follow groups on social media, following those of different cultures and backgrounds so you can learn from them. Invite people from other cultures into your home. Learn a new language. And remember that even similar people have differences worth learning about. So I found a 3-stage model to understanding differences, and I acknowledged the words a few slides ago, but didn't talk about them in detail. Awareness is being aware that there are individual differences, but that we are more alike than we are different. Knowledge is obtaining necessary information and knowledge about those who are different from us. And skills needed to be more sensitive to have effective conversations. In closing, my overall goal was that you understand differences, some of the things that make us different, but also acknowledge that while we're different, we're very much the same. Understanding differences of people, especially cultures, traditions, ethnicities, will take a little time. It's not just one conversation. It's not just 2 Google searches and reading a couple journals. You would have to commit to wanting to learn more about a culture. If we have the courage to ask someone from a diverse setting what something means to them, then a perceptual switch begins to emerge. So going back to my poll everywhere question, we don't question the things that have been told of us from childhood, that we believe, that we traditionally celebrate, that our backgrounds come from. We don't question those things. Why is it not the same level of easy to not question other people? If we don't want to research our own backgrounds and just take the beliefs as they're given to us, how do we not accept other people in the same way? And that's the end.
Pardon me, I don't know if it's time for a question or a comment, but I'm having this Zoom from my telephone.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Do you think that schools in America should start having foreign language classes from the first grade? Because I have been to many countries overseas, and they have, for example, English, French, German, etc., from first grade. And my second comment would be, how can we change language teaching, because languages are more than words if you incorporate the cultural and also the nonverbal communication. I think this would greatly help everything that you were speaking to us about. Thank you.
I can answer the first one. The second question, not so much, because I don't really have much experience with curriculum building. But the first question, I do think that if you start foreign language earlier, it helps students learn more about the language, not just maybe a year in middle school and then I have to take 3 conversation credits in high school and then it's possibly over, because I might or might not take it again in college. It's totally up to me. I think it would help students be more global learners if they had more time learning a language.
Dr. Gray, my name is Luke. I work with a lot of the schools. I work for the state, and I travel around and work with a lot of schools in our state. And when I do workshops similar to this, I often get the question, we are a small rural town that is very, very predominantly Caucasian in our rural area. And so how can a teacher incorporate activities and lessons around cultural humility in an agriculture classroom, knowing that a lot of the students may not have the opportunity to meet people who aren't much different than them, perhaps for several more years? That's just a question I get frequently, and I never really know how to answer it.
So I will be transparent in saying I do not know a lot about agriculture, but I can answer that question generally. When I teach lesson planning in my cultural responsiveness and teaching class, I tell them to, so after you plan the content, you plan the instruction, you plan the activities, try to find activities that reflect the cultures in your classroom. Try to find language from some of the cultures that are represented in your classroom. It gives you an opportunity to, 1, you're doing research. 2, you're doing research and also being able to ask the questions of the students who may have the difference in the classroom. You're also showing that you can apply what you learn from your students to your whole classroom, which is also making everyone else culturally aware of this person in your classroom or anyone that's being represented that you're teaching about.
Dr. Gray, I think it may be helpful for the attendees and participants if you could give some examples of the things that you do in your classroom to create a culturally diverse experience or even just an inclusive environment.
Okay.
I think, and then also I would encourage anyone that's on the call that has things that they do to share those as well.
So one thing, now this is coming from an undergraduate junior level classroom. And one thing I did last semester was I let each person teach a chapter and create a lesson plan based on how they would want their culture represented in their classroom. So while this class, the cultural responsiveness in teaching class, is learning about teaching different cultures, I also wanted to make sure they knew how to apply what they learn about a culture into their lesson planning, because they're not the experts, right? Each of them, well, let me go back. I teach at a historically Black college, so the majority of my class is Black. However, all of my students are not Black, and they all do not come from the same socioeconomic background, nor do they come from the same type of towns, cities, or states. So we had a lot of differences, and I made sure that at the end of each of their teachings with their own lesson plan, they shared their experiences from their K through 12, not like they had a career, but their K through 12 experience about cultural differences that they now acknowledge as college students.
And so it looks like someone had indicated in the chat one of the things that they do, but I do think it would be important at this time to open it up to anyone and have them share what are some of the things you do to bring cultural competency or awareness to your classrooms, or things you'd like to do. Maybe you're not, haven't done them yet, but things that you'd like to do, or questions that you have about lessons and how it could be created and made more culturally competent.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and one thing, I'm a first-year ag teacher, and one thing that I thought about doing, having the students do, is kind of a farm-to-table assignment where they're at home, and a majority of our students are going to be home the majority of the time, helping their family either cook lunch or cook dinner. And as I'm listening in on this meeting, I'm thinking about having them do some kind of dish that is from their culture, and also integrating it to ag. Of course, I just, recently thought of this, so as I put it together, I hope that it goes really well, and it'll also help me learn, as I come from a very small town in the mountains of North Carolina, and so we don't have various cultures within our small town there. And as I'm in a completely different location, I'm definitely looking forward to getting to know more cultures as I teach throughout this semester.
This is Scott Stone, and I teach in like a lot of you, I teach in a community that is predominantly Caucasian, but I think the other thing that we tend to miss is, even if there are Caucasian in our classroom, there are different cultures within that Caucasian classroom. I mean, I've got students who come from very wealthy families, and I have students who come from very poor families. I think, we have to expand our thought process sometimes to include all of those people, because like in your meal activity, in the wealthy family, their meal might be, a fancy dinner, where if you've got a family that's struggling to survive, their meal might be, bread and water that night. So I think we have to kind of expand that definition some.
I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I'm on a Bluetooth, so hopefully everyone can hear me. I'd like to kind of branch off of what he just said, and we could really take socioeconomics into a lot of our ag science courses, looking at natural disasters, climate change of climate, how are different economically prepared students faced with those different challenges, and looking at aspects in that respect. I'm going to be doing a lesson on earthquakes for my earth science class, and we're going to be taking a look at an earthquake that happened in 1989 close to us in the San Francisco Bay Area and comparing it to an earthquake that occurred, I believe it was in 2016 in Haiti, and looking at the differences and how the different cultures and different people were impacted within those regions.
This is Robin McLean. And, along those same lines of looking at how, the socioeconomic, the different impact, I teach in a school district that serves a military base. And so no matter what topic we're talking about, I try to pull in a discussion point of either what have you experienced or what have you seen, because I have students who have lived abroad, and maybe when we're getting into the unit where we're talking about uses of animal, they've had the opportunity to experience eating horse because it's allowed in the country, that they happen to be on a military base in. And it doesn't just have to be students coming from, a military background. I have students who have traveled to visit family members and have seen cotton fields as they travel south. And so I think for one of the things I do is I open a lot of topics to dialogue of what have you seen, so we get that shared experience of the fact that not everything is like central New Jersey.
So Dr. Gray, it looks like we have a question from Caitlin about how do you approach a culture or food fair, as an example, without stereotyping different cultures than our own. And I think that's maybe an overarching question. Everyone is here wanting to learn and understand, but also be aware that they don't want to offend anyone. So could you help us all walk through a little bit more about what the proper way of being engaging without disrespecting, a little bit more examples and thoughts on that, please?
Yes, is that kind of like the question you just asked me too?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. No, I just saw it. I don't know if I have a delay or if I'm just, this is user error with the chat function. But my first suggestion when asking someone questions about their experiences would be communications 101, and that's like being warm and fuzzy and starting with, maybe in my culture's tradition is to do this, what does yours do? So making it a shared learning opportunity by talking about yourself first and what your beliefs are, what your traditions are, what your ethnicity celebrates, what things about you, so that one, they understand what it is that you're asking, and two, they see that you're openly sharing, so they know that you're not being disrespectful or have any ill intent. I think we're all adults. We know what type of language and tone offends us. So just don't use that when asking someone about their experience. I think socioeconomic background is probably one of the hardest things to have conversation about, especially when it's perceived that you don't come from the same background. But I think that when you acknowledge up front that you are trying to gain knowledge about their experience, it's kind of like an icebreaker that you're doing within the conversation. And it's making them feel more comfortable to have the conversation. And I think too, in a classroom, when you ask respectful questions of students openly, it teaches other students how to ask questions. And going back to the poll everywhere question, it gives the students an opportunity to ask questions of their parents.
one of the things that I just received as a private message was, you know, making sure that we're reminded that that not just because if there aren't any students of color in your classroom, that doesn't mean that you have to look for another area of diversity, although that's okay. It's still good and important, you know, this person said, for them to learn about African American and Black culture, even if there aren't any Black students in the classroom. Students of color learn about white people all of the time, and so it's okay. You know, these are the words from this conversation, and so it's okay and should be encouraged to teach about things that students may be not exposed to. I guess, what are your thoughts on that, Dr. Gray?
I completely agree. I think that I'm getting my words right so that it comes out properly. I think that it's more important to share with students that there are people that are different from them, and then introducing different races, ethnicities, and cultures by levels or stages, starting with the people that they're in a classroom with, so that they understand the differences there, and then adding on different cultures and ethnicities. But everyone needs to learn about everyone, yes, regardless of who's in the classroom. I agree with that 100%.
Hi, my name is Ruby Richards. I teach agriculture in California, and something cool that I like that we do in our section is we actually have a local competition that's done with public speaking for the opening closing ceremonies, and there's actually a part of the competition that's done in Spanish. And so our students who are native or bilingual or non-native speakers can actually compete and participate in that competition. And it's pretty cool to work alongside your Spanish teachers to help coach, and also see those kids kind of be able to present a speech in their native language or a different language and celebrate that.
Also note that I'm jotting all of these things down too, to include in our resources area. These are great.
I'm so sorry. I'll share my PowerPoint as well.
Another thought that came to me in terms of diversity and cultural awareness, I spent this morning in committee meetings for work, and one of the committees is the culture committee. And what they've done this year is they know that we put an emphasis in February on Black History Month, and in March on Women's History Month. And they've actually incorporated that we have a shared Google sheet that is going to be filled out that helps connect to other cultures, significant days and holidays that might happen, that in the morning announcements, there will just be a 1 or 2 sentence statement expressing, you know, today is such and such a day and is an important, you know, cultural event or holiday event in, you know, such and such a religion or background or that sort of thing, even though it's just a snippet on the morning announcements, to help expand the scope of culture, that it's not just one particular ethnicity or gender in one particular month.
I think that's a great idea. It also contributes to students feeling like they belong, because somebody's highlighting something that seems like it's really small from their culture or tradition.
I'm going to, so up on your screens now is something that we're working on between NAA and National FFA. This is not completed, but it's very similar to what Robin Robin had just mentioned, in that highlighting and celebrating different cultures and different needs and uniqueness. And so this will be something that we'll be rolling out here over the course of the next few months, highlighting some of those special celebrations and events in different religions and different identities and those kinds of things. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And I love hearing that Robin's school is doing that too.
That's cool, Ellen. I like that.
This is Scott Stone again, and I have a question. So a lot of times I teach high school, and a lot of times our students are really good at hiding the fact that they feel left out or not included. And oftentimes it doesn't really show up until they go home and talk to their family at home, that they express their frustration with being excluded or being treated differently. What are some warning signs that we can look for in our classrooms to help us gauge ahead of time that maybe we're inadvertently doing something that is causing this student concern or frustration?
Isolation and lack of engagement, and also lack of expressing any need, want, or excitement for connecting to other people in the classroom. I mean, we have students who are quiet, they're just naturally quiet. They are observant, they do all their work, they don't cause problems. So we typically we ignore them, but the attention isn't solely on them. I think that the moment a student starts to show that they don't want to engage with anyone, and you never see them talking to other people, that's when your presence needs to be most consistent. And it might not even, this isn't a cultural thing. This is just like kind of social awareness or social acknowledgement of their behaviors.
Thank you.
Dr. Grade, Julian posted a question about.
I just responded.
Okay, good. Maybe talk about resources within the state that might be good, and how most universities, go ahead, sorry.
So again, I need to be transparent in that I don't work closely with agriculture. Our agriculture department is heavily part of a lot of the successes on campus. Kentucky State University is a land-grant institution, and from that, we've had lots of opportunities for students to come, scholarship opportunities, internship opportunities, research opportunities. And this allows for more companies and corporations to want to be a part of and be able to provide experiences for our students because they're coming from a land-grant institution. Oh, diversity and inclusion. Sorry, I just saw the second part of that question. So diversity and inclusion is pretty heavy on our campus, especially among faculty and staff. There are a lot of opportunities for students too, but we have a lot of people on campus who specialize and are experts of diversity and inclusion. So we have a lot of that programming on campus.
I can add something in real quick. My name is Jacob Ball. I teach at Carter G. Woodson Academy in Lexington, Kentucky. We just added a new ag program. And one thing that we've done is we've partnered with the Manners groups at University of Kentucky and also through K-State. So that's, if you're looking for a way to incorporate some of the professional development, and basically what we've done is we've added Manners as a 4th division in our FFA chapter. So we're trying to basically blend the two organizations at the high school and middle school level so that students are, we're an affiliated chapter now. So every scholar that walks into my classroom is a member of FFA and Manners from the get-go. Now, our student population is 85% African American, 13% Hispanic, and 2% white. Now, it's a unique program that's everything's taught through the lens of agriculture, or through the lens of African American history and culture. A few of the things that I've done in the classroom, on my wall, I have a African American Hispanic Agriculture Wall of Fame. So students have highlighted some of the folks that you don't necessarily hear about that have made contributions to our industry. Also, kind of with the HBCU that Dr. Gray mentioned, I'm a graduate of UK, and I'm sure most of us are graduates of land grants. We've got our flags up in our room from where we went to school, but I had my students create a wall of every HBCU that offers an agriculture degree. So just trying to promote those different programs, just simple things that just the optics of what the room looks like to promote opportunities for those students in agriculture. But I'm fortunate because University of Kentucky has one of the strongest Manners programs in the country, year in and year out. But the folks, if you have a Manners or a Manners chapter at one of the land grants close to you, I would reach out to them about establishing a junior Manners program. And then if you don't have one, email, somebody at National Manners or Dr. Farrell at University of Kentucky, and they can certainly put you in contact with somebody to incorporate some of those opportunities through FFA and Manners.
I'll also state that FFA and NAA are looking at ways to provide resources for agriculture teachers around junior Manners, and junior Manners is also in the development phase of creating a curriculum for junior Manners advisors. And so I've been helping work with that. But so yes, junior Manners and Manners are incredible programs, something that I don't think a lot of ag teachers are yet familiar with, and we're working at NAA and FFA to fix that. Any final thoughts, Dr. Gray, or anyone else on the call that would benefit this conversation before we wrap up and I provide a few closing details?
Yes, if I might interject again, Dr. Denise Bader, Professor of Linguistics and English as an international language. I have been happy to see that we have junior high school, grade school, and university educators on here. And I think in today's world, even if you are a K through 12 institution, you would have a community college or university near you, or even you could reach out to your local extension. And I know at a lot of college and university levels, there are international student groups, and it would be possible to have some come down. And I especially like the holiday theme, because this is where the fun part of learning about another culture comes in, because there may be special dances, but especially special foods, and everyone always gets excited about foods, and this could be a stepping off point for more things. But I would encourage people to reach out to universities, colleges, extension. I know for the 4-H program have children in FFA and 4-H. There's a lot of the international visitors, and we always have a program about midway through the exchanges that they can present different stations, like games and foods, paper money, stamps, clothing, etc. So more sharing and integration would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Any closing thoughts or or what are the key takeaways you'd like for the participants to have, Dr. Gray?
My key takeaway, well, not mine. The key takeaways I would like for you to have are, one, acknowledging what you don't know will help you learn from the experience of others. Being open when people share their experiences so that you can learn from them, and sharing what you learn from them with others so that the learning can continue.
Perfect. Well, of course, thank you so much, Dr. Gray, for your time today. Thank you to everyone who is so open and willing to ask questions and share ideas. We're continually compiling all of this. I know some of you asked some questions, maybe you missed the beginning part. You will receive an electronic professional development certificate via the email that you registered with sometime in the next week or two. And then also you can go to the NAA website professional development page to find the archived versions of the last 2 sessions, as well as registration for the upcoming 3 sessions. And so as I mentioned, tomorrow, Dr. Roger Cleveland will be coordinating and facilitating a conversation on building an inclusion, diversity, and equity plan. I believe we have about 100 or so folks that have registered for that so far, and that's for anybody that is interested in learning more about that process. And then I will share some information as well that may be of use to you about what we have done at NAA and National FFA to build our plan and how that's going, and just provide some additional information on that. Next week's session related to this specifically as far as our summer series. So today was culture, next week is blind spots, implicit bias in the classroom. And so this is about stereotyping and prejudices that maybe are unconscious, that we don't even think about, that guide our preference for students or social groups. And that will be presented by Ms. Jamie Nevitt, also part of Dr. Cleveland's associates. So again, thank you so much to Dr. Erica Gray. I believe she'll be joining us again in about 3 weeks for a session on culturally responsive teaching. And then August 19th, so 2 weeks from today, Dr. Cleveland will be facilitating a conversation on microaggressions and micromessaging, which I think you'll all find very interesting. All of this is very interesting, very important. And I am so honored and thrilled to see so many of you joining us today and being part of this important conversation. So we'll continue to share this information with others. I'm going to stay on for a moment and answer some of these questions that are in the chat that came through, if you have them specifically to me. Otherwise, I wish you all the best day. Thank you again, Dr. Gray. We'll see you in 3 weeks.
Thank you.